The call to drive greater decarbonisation by further electrification is growing louder all the time. But electrification is moving at different stages. So what can we expect to see in the coming year? What's just around the corner? To help me unpack this, I'm joined by Stuart Thompson from ABB Electrification. Stuart,
and Kelvin,
you'll have some insights into what we can expect in the coming year. First of all, it's been a turbulent last few years. We've come out of the pandemic. That had an impact on business. And also now we've got quite a turbulent geopolitical situation. What impact has that had on the way a global business does business?
Yeah, I think from a geopolitical standpoint, we're continuing down that path in 2024, unfortunately, with what's happening in the Middle East. The Ukraine war is continuing, of course. But from a servicing perspective, we used to have a lot of people mobilized around the world. And the pandemic helped us develop technologies like augmented reality, communications to sites and customers, that could be do with remote servicing and remote service applications. So that's one positive thing that came out of the pandemic. But what we're finding now is that, energy security per country is very important. And so they want the services and the localization of those services taking place in that particular market. So in the next 12 months, we're going to be opening 3 or 4 more countries up for service operations. We're going to have decentralized support using technology, leveraging augmented reality, leveraging communications to do that so that we've got global experts working on local problems. But the localization of that and empowering the customers to do more and empowering our own teams to do more locally is key.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you said that because of the pandemic, these new ways of working developed. Do you think they would have developed without the pandemic eventually, or did the pandemic just accelerate some initiatives that were already brewing?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the way we work, the pandemic enabled us to work more remotely. And I think a lot of that technology was there. A lot of us are using Zoom and Teams to keep in touch with our teams that are distributed all over the world. But I think what the pandemic did was we took some technologies that were really at pilot stage and accelerate them into full commercialization, more out of necessity than anything else. We couldn't fly across borders and countries at that point, so we could ship headsets or equipment to engineers in that country. We could then use language translation technologies. We could use the expert, but we could deploy that resource so much faster now. And also from a carbon footprint perspective, they weren't flying all over the planet, burning carbon in aircrafts. They weren't taking that time. But the field expert in Italy could be supporting China in the morning and the US in the afternoon, and deployed so much more rapidly. And that's a major problem in this industry as well, is resources, people and capabilities diminishing over time. So being able to scale it and deploy it was really a lot of acceleration that happened because of the pandemic.
And that switch from global to local, if you like. Yeah. How does that affect companies that are handling a huge amount of data processing, computing, something which, in our minds we might think is an entirely global and not localized thing? How do the two interact?
Yeah, I think there's different models now that have come out, particularly from a data security standpoint. So a lot of equipment we're moving towards big global cloud-based platforms. The geopolitical situation between Europe, the US and China has seen the segregation of that data and the way we store data and apply data by various regulations between countries, whether that's through materials or data privacy and security in its own right. So a lot more emphasis now is on the site data processing and location within an industrial facility. Edge-based computing is becoming much more powerful. Data sensing at the site is producing a lot of material, but making decisions at the local point and the local site. We still take necessary data and take that up to a higher level because we can use things like artificial intelligence or machine learning or data analytics to drive outcomes for customers. But it's more around a recommendation or a decision rather than decision-making process. It's guidance and it's advice. So we talk about advisory services. We can take all that data and information to give a recommendation, but then it needs to be applied in the control, and that is decisioned locally rather than remotely from the site. So a lot of evolution in this sort of area, Kelvin.
You said a few minutes ago about, that there are workforce concerns in that, it's difficult to get the physical workers.
Yeah.
There's concerns that AI is taking or could potentially take workers' jobs, but it sounds to me that what you're saying is the greater use of AI and digitalization is sort of plugging a gap that is potentially workforce-wise might just get bigger. The workforce problem could get greater.
Absolutely.
But the AI is sort of reversing that problem.
Yeah, it's helping us in come out with these solutions. So, for example, if we want to run a time-based maintenance program at a customer's site, every year we shut things down and we check it, we validate it, and that takes a certain amount of labor. If we're then analysing the condition of the equipment, we're looking at real condition of equipment, we may be able to extend the life of that maintenance routine out 3 or 4 times longer based on the actual utilisation of the equipment. So instead of having the labour go every 12 months, you have the shutdown of the line, you lose that productivity. Through analytics of what the condition of the equipment is, what it's doing, we can then predict that maybe you don't need to shut it down for 3 or 4 years before you do your next intervention on that equipment. So we can now model that globally with all of ABB's equipment. We have millions of installations. We know that in a drier climate, it'll perform differently to in a colder climate, etc. So we can start modeling this for customers, and we can probably save them between 3 to 4 times the savings that they would have on operations on maintaining equipment, and therefore the amount of labor that they're using to do it in that respect. In other areas, replicating locally the absolute expert on gas-insulated switchgear in every country, it's almost an impossibility, right? So using technology to share that knowledge, like I said, through augmented reality or other tools, it scales that across the world, but it also helps us pick the best people around the planet and bring them to the customer locally. So we might have an expert in Asia for one type of area, the US or in Europe, but they're available to the planet, to share that resource. So it's really a shared resource going around the world, and using technology, we can optimize that application and drive the full servicing for the customer.
And is what you've just described there maybe the sort of the definition between the distinction between digitalization, which is a very broad,
yes,
covers a multitude of sins, and smart? Is there a differentiator, and is it perhaps what you've just described, to deploy something globally with pinpoint accuracy?
Yeah, well, when we talk about we say digitalization is an enabler, right? It's something that we do in every aspect of our business, right? Even if we're having a salesperson call on a customer to understand what their needs are, we use digital tools to help us prioritize where we spend the time. We use digital tools in the way customers order equipment from us or can see what our stock or our inventory is. But we also use digital tools to design better products or make algorithms about products to give us feedback. So for me, digitalization is an enabler that's across every aspect of the business that we do today. It's not something that we just apply into a product. Doing things smart and prioritizing what we do and getting more data and information and synthesizing that data into decision making is what I would call smart, right? And what we work on as a OEM like ABB. We can give you all the data around your site and your products, but helping you make those smart decisions where the priority is, where to focus on. We all have limited operational budgets or capital budgets today. How do we maximize it based on our facility? So taking that data, using smart decisions that we have globally, helping the customer prioritize on where they make their investment to maximize the outcome that they want, whether it's around productivity of the operation, whether it's energy efficiency and reliability, or even sustainability. we can give them data to help them make those decisions and synthesize that down to their priorities for their operations at each particular site.
You mentioned sustainability there. There's a lot of talk at the moment, and there's various definitions of circularity.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what does circularity mean to you personally, and how are you rolling that out across ABB?
Yeah, well, circularity is a very important thing for all of us, really. I mean, it's how we support our planet and our future from an environmental perspective. We've developed this throwaway culture, right? We buy things, we throw them away, and we buy something new and replace it. In Europe, particularly in the electrical infrastructure, is pretty much built out. We're constrained on where the equipment can be. We're constrained on the space. But we can use a lot of those assets continuously, the copper, the bus bar, the steel. We don't need to replace all that. It's how do you change the intelligence within it? How can we retrofit and upgrade something, taking out the old equipment, which might be something bad like SF6 technology. It might be analog equipment and not digital. How do we integrate it and put it into existing infrastructure? So 50% of the infrastructure is still there tomorrow. We're just reusing it for another 30 years. We're changing the intelligence within it so it can make smart decisions within that infrastructure and continue to move forward. But circularity is more than that. It's when we take the equipment out, can we recycle it? Can we redeploy it? Can we repurpose it? So that's a big aspect of it. Circularity is also in the way ABB designs our products. What's the environmental impact on that? What are we emitting as carbon in the factories on the products we produce? And most importantly, from our perspective, for validity to the end customer, is how do we third-party certify that to guarantee to you that what we're telling you is right, that we're walking the talk, we're using renewable energy on our plants, we've got materials that are recycled within our products, but we carry the cycling through all the way through the life cycle of the product, and we help decommission a lot of equipment and do the right things with that at the end of the day. So for service, that's our business. We look after the customer from the day they buy that bit of ABB equipment. We're with you for that 30 years. We can help you modernize it, continue the life even further, and minimize that future carbon footprint for the customer, which is becoming financially viable and incentivized through regulation here in Europe and also in the US through the Inflation Reduction Acts that the Biden administration rolled out.
And when you're giving that, you're taking a bit of equipment and giving it a second, third, or even fourth lease of life.
Yes.
You're also, presumably within ABB, innovating for new technology and equipments.
Yes.
There's a spirit of collaboration now, or there's an acceptance that to collaborate within the energy transition is how you're going to get the energy transition to where it needs to be. Yeah. So I'm wondering, how are you collaborating and who are you collaborating with?
Yeah, I mean, we're a big organization, right? But there's a lot of innovation and development happening within the market, and we want to sponsor and support that innovation to bring the best opportunities for our end users and customers. So there's a couple of areas around sensing technology. The cost of sensing these days has come down to dollars and cents, right? It's not thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we can use new sensing devices to sense changes in operation, changes in environment, and we can have very small interventions on the equipment in the first place, so you don't have to shut down what you've got. We can install it on brownfield devices. An example, we work with a company out of Denmark called Octogrid. They use acoustics to monitor transformers of any type in their equipment. Or a company like Protexo out of California, where we're building edge-based computing solutions for service analytics. Another company called Microsec out of Singapore, where we're embedding firmware into devices to look for cybersecurity breaches on equipment and products. So we're not experts in all of these areas. We're experts in electrification. We're experts in what our customers are looking for. But we're bringing companies that are very agile in development and really focused in these areas and in applying it in an electrification application. And so we continually invest in these areas and development to bring new solutions to the electrification space and the brownfield and greenfield space as well.
And are some of these companies startups?
Absolutely. I mean,
what's the attraction of working with a startup as opposed to another established player?
Yeah, I think that the startups are very hungry to adapt and innovate and be very agile around customers' needs. Most of them are very deep in the domain knowledge of the product or the technology that they're working on. But working with a big organization like ABB, which has tentacles in over 100 companies and millions of installations around the world, we can provide them real-time information and data as to what the customer's problems are. We can help translate their innovation into value propositions for customers. So it's almost their raw naivety of where the technology can go that's super attractive, and their energy and their dynamic innovation processes mean we can move really quickly. As against even some of our own processes or other large companies that we work with. So it really does bring some new ideas and innovation to the table, and helps us collaborate and learn as a learning organisation, as much as our customers are learning at the same time.
Yeah, it must be quite an interesting dynamic. You talked about their raw naivety and their hunger.
Yeah.
And for a big company that like ABB to suddenly interact with almost a complete counterpoint creates somewhere in the middle something quite dynamic.
Absolutely. And we definitely manage these as separate projects and outside of our normal business cycles to drive that agility. But it helps us learn, right? We've got to keep learning as an organization. If we keep doing what we did yesterday, tomorrow, we're still going to be a yesterday company, and we've got to do something different all the time. And it also helps from a community perspective. It brings talent in, it brings new ideas in, and it makes people want to work for a company like ABB. When we put sustainability and innovation at the forefront, we can really attract some great young talent into the organization. And as we mentioned earlier, talent's a really tough thing these days. And to have that option of working in a big global, but also working with startups is extremely attractive and open-minded from the organization.
We're talking about trends that we might see next year. If we met in a year's time and there was one thing that could happen that you would dearly love to see happen in the next 12 months, what would it be?
Yeah, I think from a sustainability perspective, if ABB was really seen as driving sustainable solutions for customers around modernizing and upgrading existing infrastructure and putting in new digital technologies that can increase safety, increase reliability, and increase, the whole sustainable aspect for customers, I'd be super happy, And I think that we're right at the beginning of this sustainable journey. And services and ABB, our focus around sustainability in our own operations is absolute paramount. And we want to translate that and take that to the market as well and help our customers achieve and walk the talk that we've done, but help customers apply that in their operations. So I'd really like to be able to do that. And I do hope that the geopolitical situation does stabilize in the next 12 months as well, but we'll be able to manage it either way as ABB.
Yeah. Stuart, thank you very much for your insights today. It's been a pleasure. If you would like more insights, make sure you join the Enlit community.